This podcast is supported by the original organic bedding and bath brand, Koyuchi.
Koyuchi has spent 35 years pioneering quality organic textiles, long before the word organic became, trendy. But words matter to Koyuchi. Words like craftsmanship, longevity, and wellness. So what does the word wellness mean to Koyuchi? It means that all of our products are absolutely free from harsh chemicals and dangerous toxins that can seep into your skin. It means effortless style that looks as good as it feels with naturally breathable, pre-washed organic cotton. And what does all of that mean to you? Well, it means that you can sleep well in Koyuchi's crisp, cool, luxuriously soft sheets that are ethically made and made with you in mind. Live well, sleep well with Koyuchi. Get 15% off your first order when you visit Koyuchi.com. That's Koyuchi.com to get 15% off. Koyuchi.com.
Axe.
Welcome to the Tuesday edition of the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. Very glad you're able to spend some time with us. For those of you that had the day off yesterday, I hope you enjoyed your long weekend. I did notice many people didn't. It was kind of hit or miss. It was a retail closing day yesterday, so that meant a lot of stores were closed. But I was out and about yesterday and did notice that several businesses, and even businesses here inside our studios, or not at least our studios, but the building where our studios are, were working yesterday. So it's an interesting. These provincial holidays are interesting, right? Some people get them, some people don't, and it's always a crapshoot to kind of figure out where and what's open and what's not. It's a bit of a gray day out there today. It looks like it's warming up, though. We do have some snow in the forecast, according to Alistair Alder's forecast. We could see snow or showers tomorrow as the temperature, though, rises to 4 degrees. So we're going to go a couple degrees above the normal temperatures. The normals for this time of the year, by the way, folks, is 0 for a daytime high and -9 for an overnight low. So it's pretty close to normal today, and it doesn't look like that snow is going to amount to much. And if it mixes with rain, it might get more melting underway. I saw some melting in my neighborhood over the last couple of days. The icicles were hanging from the roof of the building, and the snow on my deck was starting to melt. So that's a good sign as we roll our way through February. We're more than halfway through now, folks. We're at the 17th today, and March is right around the corner, which Alistair will call the heartbreaker month, because we get a couple of warm days and then another storm rolls through. So we'll keep you up to date on what's happening weather-wise, but at least at this point, it doesn't look like we're going to get any kind of significant snow for the next 5 days or not. It's always just a heart-wrencher when I wake up and I start to read stories of another mass shooting, this one in Pawtucket in Rhode Island. 2 dead and 3 injured at a hockey game there yesterday. The shooter, known by 2 names, Robert K. Dorgan and Roberta Esposito. This just a couple of miles from the shooting site at Brown University, if you can remember that one. And I was reading an article just before we came on the air this morning, and there's a organization south of the border in the United States that tracks mass shootings in the United States. And according to them, the Pawtucket shooting on the weekend was the 41st in the United States this year. Just think about that for a minute. They've had 41 mass shootings in the United States, and I think the year's only 47 days long or old. Isn't that something? And, of course, the investigation continues into the mass shooting tragedy in Tumbler Ridge, BC. Police have changed their story a little bit on some of the weapons that were used in this horrific event. Now they're saying it was a long gun, which they've kind of maintained all the way through the event. And now the second weapon that the shooter brought to the school is being described as a modified rifle, not a modified handgun, as was first reported by police. 18-year-old Jesse Van Roosseler had no target, according to police at the school. They say that Van Vutselaar was hunting. Chilling. Several mental health calls to the home of the 18-year-old who had begun to transition about 6 years ago. Police have not said if that's connected to the transition is connected to the calls or what the mental health issues were. The investigation obviously remains ongoing. I understand they're bringing portable schools in to that community as it tries to come to grips with this. And the thought process is that they want to get kids back to school, but that would be a difficult situation there. To a little more happier news of the day, and the Olympics continues. Canadian women hockey is getting ready to go for gold. That game goes Thursday against the United States. This is kind of the perennial pairing when it comes to Olympic gold medals. Canada and the United States, I think, have faced off in the last, if I'm not mistaken, the last 8. At least Canada's been in the last 8 gold medal games. And they're going to go at it again on Thursday. The men, with, of course, all of those Cole Harbour connections. In the quarterfinals tomorrow, they will play the winner of today's matchup between Czechia and Denmark. And some gold medals on the weekend. Finally, Canada has broke the goose egg when it came to the gold medals. I mean, we use greatest of all time a lot, right, when it comes to athletes these days. But this time around, I think it's appropriate. Mikael Kingsbury winning another gold in his event, and Megan Oldham also winning a gold medal over the weekend. So Canada has a couple of gold medals. Also some Atlantic Canadian connections, some maritime connections to the medal podium in Cortina and Milan. And that, of course, is Courtney Sereau, who won a silver medal on I think it was Saturday in speed skating. Courtney hails from Moncton, so some Atlantic Canadian connections to that there as well. You no doubt have been watching the curling controversy unfold at the games in Italy. Team Canada accused of breaking a rule, which the Coles notes of it is that once you let go of the handle of a stone, you're no longer able to touch the stone. And there was some accusations and some video evidence leveled against Mark Kennedy, who plays for Team Canada, this was the Sweden game. I think it was Friday, if it was maybe Thursday. And some video evidence showing that a finger allegedly touched the stone, and he lost his cool on the sheet. There were some F-bombs that went back and forth, and the Canadian Curling Association and the World Curling Federation kind of got all up in arms over the whole thing. And I mean, if he's doing it, it's cheating, right? It's breaking a rule. So they put people onto the hog lines, and then there was some more allegations in other matches. There was a rock taken off in one of Rachel Holman's games as a result of this. I understand that officials are kind of starting to back off on this now. It's interesting, and this isn't the first time that there have been allegations, I think is the right word, made. When it comes to these high-stakes curling games, the whole, and this is an antiquated term, but it's a gentleman's, or I guess a gentle person's game, and there are set rules on the books that you can't do things, you can't touch stones, you can't anything. There was an allegation last year that somebody had hit a rock with a broom, and they said they didn't, and then there was a bunch of stuff that went back and forth on that, and now this controversy is, I think, probably marring the success that the men's team has had on the sheets of ice in Cortina. And I think that when we start to put curling into the same stratosphere as hockey and all of the other Olympic events, regardless of what you think about curling, I think it only makes sense that there are stronger enforcements and enforcement mechanisms in place. This isn't just curling for a Bonspiel win or even a Brier or a Scotties. This is an Olympic event, right? And I think that this has probably blown the lid off of some of the problems with the gentleman's agreement, as it's called, about following the rules. And I think you'll probably see moving forward the world governing agency that governs curling will probably take a stronger approach to enforcement of the rules. To be quite honest, I think it's the right move. I think because these events have now become so high stakes, I guess it's an Olympic event. So I think that you're probably going to see enforcement of the rules. Probably going to see umpires on the hog lines, I would think, as a permanent fixture. I know they're kind of backing off that now, but I think you probably will moving forward. All that being said, Brad Jacobs and his foursome having a pretty good tournament, sitting, I think, in second place behind the Swiss. At least it was last night. And Rachel Homan is currently on the ice right now against Sweden in what is, I think, a must-win for Team Canada with 3 losses already in the tournament. And, of course, Team Sweden in Hasselberg is a rather strong opponent. I don't think they've lost yet here at the games in Italy. So we'll keep an eye on what's going on with Rachel and any additional medal hopes. I was watching some speed skating just before we came on the air today, and we'll keep you up to date with what is going on with that moving forward. It's never an Olympics unless there's some kind of controversy, right? It seems to follow the event, and I think it's because it's so big, and I think it's because it is so. There's such a microscope on it, and there's so much pressure on the athletes. I think that is going to be the reason why we start to see that change. We're going to take our first break here very shortly on the program as we get to you set up for a Tuesday here. We've got a busy show today, a little bit of focus on labor. You may or may not know that there's on the heels of some labor situations over at a couple of the universities here in HRM as we kicked off the school year this year. There's another group of union members and the art college, NSCAD, that are at an impasse. We'll get to a conversation with Lauren McKenzie from CUPE as part of the program today. And when we come back, I don't know if this was really quiet. It's not the typical Tim Houston bluster that we have seen as of late. But the Premier and the Nova Scotia government have now effectively ordered union members that work for the civil service or work for the province back to work 5 days a week. That's not sitting well with the president of a union that represents a bunch of them. That's Sandra Mullen. She'll be our guest when we come back. You're listening to The Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in a bit. Welcome back. There's been a lot of discussion as of late with regards to back to work and back to work mandates. We've talked about it here on the program. We've talked about it in the course of the open hours, and of course, we've talked about it when it comes to things like traffic congestion and efficiency and those kind of things. But when this kind of came across my desk late last week, I think it was, I was surprised that the Premier was so very quiet about the whole thing. And apparently, Tim Houston has decided to end flexible remote work for about 3,000 people that work for the provincial government. And that's not sitting well with the president of the union that represents a bunch of them, and that is the NSGEU. And the president of NSGEU is Sandra Mullen. Sandra, how are you?
Good, thank you.
I guess the first thing were you surprised as I was when this kind of came out and there was no announcement or anything?
Well, we were surprised in the fact that all we've been hearing from this government is about this huge $1.4 billion deficit, and I see no way in which this, does anything to improve the financial picture of the province. It's going to cost money for government.
I guess the question is then, Sandra, how does it cost the government more? I mean, they've already got the office space, right?
Well, that's the problem. Over the course of the last 5 years and more, office space has been let go, and we are hearing from our members that in some cases there are 3 times the folks using a space that would be able to use that on a full-time basis. So many office spaces have been let go. This is going to cost government to increase their office space, increase the equipment and so on that has to be in those spaces. So it's not a cost-saving measure for government. And, you mentioned the concern about putting all these folks back on the road. Of the projected, it's 25 to 3,000 members, 2,500 to 3,000. Of those folks, over half of them are within the HRM area. So you are going to be increasing traffic. You're going to add to the parking dilemmas that already exist. And to add to that, there aren't the office spaces that there used to be, so government is going to be forced to lease further office space to accommodate.
Sandra, the argument I hear in favor of putting people back to work in their offices is that it's more efficient and it gives people a chance to connect other than through Zoom. Your thoughts on that? Well,
this has been working very well, and certainly these arrangements that have been made were not just casual agreements. In many cases, our members had to go through a process, signed an agreement to be able to do that work from home, because a lot of the work that they do is very important, and privacy is an issue, all of those things. So it's not just you can work at the end of your kitchen table. They had to meet requirements, they had to do a checklist, and then sign an agreement with their employer. So these folks have a signed agreement saying they can work from home, whether it's the 2 days a week, 3 days a week, or 1 day a week. And then folks build their lives around that, whether it's pickup from childcare, all of those things that folks have in their lives. Now they're saying this ends in 60 days. So the members are reaching out, quite a few members with specific issues that this agreement enabled them to build their lives around that.
Is the agreement in the collective agreement, or was it outside of it?
It's not in the collective agreement as in the telework or the ability to work from home, but certainly hours of work, all of those things are within the mandate of the employer and the collective agreement, and time and all of that is built into making changes to that. So it's just throwing these folks' lives in an uproar for what doesn't seem to be sensible. In that we have many folks who work on provincial teams, and they are going to come into an office to sit on a Teams meeting regardless. So the employer is saying, for collaboration and all of that, that has already been happening because, people do work in various parts of the province and various parts of the city. And even in a department here, there are how many offices throughout the city? So those meetings still take place remotely on a Teams or Zoom platform, not unlike here. We have many folks that we deal with, and oftentimes virtual meetings are how we do them.
You mentioned that hours of work falls within the purview of the employer, Sandra. What can the union do here?
Well, we're following with each issue that comes forward, and certainly accommodations that have been made, and there have been accommodations made prior to the pandemic, where whether it's for medical or those kinds of issues that the employer was accommodating, we want to ensure that they are adhering to those things. So we will be working with these cases one-on-one.
What are your members telling you? Are they upset?
They're very upset because of the fact that they've built their lives around these situations. And here in HRM and across the province in Nova Scotia, childcare is an issue. So by enabling folks a 2 or 3 day a week work from home, they were able to get local childcare, all of that. When you're starting to bring everybody back into downtown offices, or in some cases in rural Nova Scotia, I'm hearing from one who travels 150 kilometers a day to go in and out of that office. So there's incurred, extra costs in traveling, and then, having to either make alternate arrangements, and we just don't have the childcare spaces to enable folks to put their children in childcare spaces closer to their workspace.
It seemed to have worked well before the pandemic, didn't it?
Well, we certainly know that it's what people built their lives around. And, because we actually had signed agreements to allow these folks work from home, people made choices, whether that's to relocate to outside of the downtown core and build their lives around that. So 60 days is not significant notice. And for what? To ask government to find, they're not going to be able to find extra office space in time for that. So it's going to be challenging, and our members are reaching out absolutely, because this was a decision they made based on an agreement they had with their employer.
Sandra, I would imagine that because the NSGEU is a rather large organization, that you represent people that have been working at the office probably right through the pandemic. And
certainly.
And would be, wondering why they have to go to work, whereas some others don't.
Well, it depends on the type of work that our folks do. So
right.
Of the 8,500 civil servants, there are many folks who have had to be at work throughout the pandemic because they are delivering services at the front desk, whether that's Access Nova Scotia. Things were done differently, for sure, but our folks still had to go to work and still had to be in that physical space. So we still have lots of members who have to do that. But yet, because there are many members who could do that work remotely, office space has been let go, and so now to bring everybody back into a space, there just isn't the space for that.
Is this something that will end up on the bargaining table the next time these contracts come around?
We tried at this point in our last round to get that on the table, and they would not agree to it. And does this announcement come as a complete surprise? Possibly not. However, it's certainly not a cost-saving measure with this projected deficit. Has
the government been open to listening to your concerns about this?
We have not heard from them, and we understand that our members are being told that they will be worked with to ensure that their needs are met, but we are following it very closely.
Sandra, appreciate your time.
Thank you very much.
Sandra Mullen is the president of the NSGEU. It's April, I do believe, the end of April, that government employees, particularly unionized government employees that work in offices, have been mandated to return to work. A couple of emails from people I'd like to address just before we take the break, and on my discussion this morning about Team Canada's men's hockey team, and I'm saying the Cole Harbour connection, and a couple of people have reached out and said, well, Dan, that Brad Marchand is from Hammonds Plains, and that is absolutely correct. But, folks, been scratched for the last 2 games. So, will we see him in the quarterfinals? For sure. And then I'll say the HRM connection. We're back after the news.
Axe.
All right, welcome back as we roll along here on a Tuesday. As I look out the window, more gray skies. But boy, was it ever nice on the weekend, right? I was telling the folks around the radio station that it was the first time in a couple of weeks, as you may or may not know, I'm follically challenged. So when it gets cold, it's cold on the top of the head, and I've been wearing a toque. It seems like forever. And I was able to walk around the ball cap on the weekend. So it's just one of those subtle signs that spring's coming, folks, when the ball caps start coming out. Came across a story last week that I thought was interesting, and I know we've had a lot of discussion here on this program, and I would imagine at the coffee shops and water coolers across the city about the homeless problem and some of the initiatives that have been launched with regards to dealing with the homeless problem, trying to get people out of sleeping rough into shelter spaces, and some of those shelter spaces have taken various kinds of forms throughout this process, from shelters like the ones we see at here in the North End, all the way to hotel spaces for people to get out of the cold, and some new data is coming out showing that the hotel program is seeing a bit of a decline in use now, and that for advocates for housing and affordable housing comes as kind of a win, and it's a good news story, and I'm very pleased to welcome back into the studio. You remember we had Michael Kabalen on the program here a few months ago talking about the point-in-time account, but he's back here. He's the executive director of the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia, and I guess that is it a win? Can you call it a win?
I think it's a great example of what we should be doing more of. I think when the system, and in particularly in this case, when governments chose to kind of pivot funding from a temporary solution, a shelter-type solution, a hotel is still not a home, so we call that a shelter-type solution,
right?
And invest in what the solution to homelessness is, which is more housing, we're able to see a significant decline in one type of housing. And so, most of the people staying in hotels since kind of after the pandemic days were women with children or families with children. And there's a really good reason why. So government determined early on, and good social work says as well early on, no child should spend a night in a shelter. They are multiply time more likely to spend another night in a shelter in the future if they spend even one night in a shelter. So this kind of program is based in really good practice, that if someone comes to a shelter and they have a child with them, we don't put them in the shelter. There's money available from the provincial government, or there was, to put them in a hotel room instead. And there's a whole experience designed around that. However, as the numbers of homeless people in our community grew, we also had more people using that program. Government decided this wasn't okay. It wasn't okay for children and families to be spending nights in shelter or in hotel rooms. Even though it's better than a shelter, it's still not a home. It's also way more expensive, to put people in multiple hotels around your community as opposed to providing them housing. And so they made significant investments over the last number of years and rapidly in the last year in housing for people that would have normally been prescribed to this program. And what we saw was that, when we released our point-in-time data with you earlier or late last year, we also saw that decline in data. So, several hundred people were spending nights in hotels, and it's down to a few, tens, I think 30 to 40 people.
Yeah.
And when we release that data. So it is a win. It's a good news story because it demonstrates that if we focus on the real solution to homelessness, if we focus in on housing as the solution, which our organization is also privileged to be builders and advocates to create more of, we can end homelessness for one particular demographic. If we're able to zoom that out a bit and say, let's continue to build the types of housing that people want, the types of housing that those in our community who are losing their housing or unable to access other housing need, we can end homelessness. And it is achievable. It just takes the right kinds of investments at the right type of scale. We also know it's often cheaper than the alternative with a shelter bed or a hospital bed or a prison cell or any other alternative. So, we see this as a win. We see this as a perfect example of what we should be doing more of and what we can do more of to eliminate homelessness in our community.
And that was my next question. Obviously, anybody that has been in a hotel recently know they're not inexpensive to rent for the night, and I would imagine, with all those spaces, and we're up over 250 at one point, that it would almost be cheaper for that program to be used to create or even build affordable housing rather than to continue it.
Yeah, we see that right across the system, that all of these temporary solutions, these emergency shelter solutions, or even temporary shelter solutions, whether they're the pallet transitional shelters or any other type of, your regular shelter, even a person who has chosen to live in an encampment, all of those comes with significant costs to the taxpayer, to our community. They also come with significant challenges for the people that live in them. It's not housing, and it comes with a lot of trauma. It comes with a lot of difficulty living in. People think that a shelter is the final stop for people. I would challenge you to spend a night in a shelter and realize it's not a great place to be. It's what we're offering folks, but housing is the real solution. And we know we can do it for cheaper than the current system. And then this is another example. So more housing is the solution. I can't say it enough. I'll say it 20 more times maybe while we're here today, because it does, and this program demonstrates, it is what we need more of, and it is what ends the expensive cost and the kind of transition or the trauma that family might be living through.
Does that responsibility fall on a nonprofit like yourself, or should this be a government initiative? If you had a magic wand, Michael, and you could say, all right, we're going to solve this program today or this problem today, and you could wave your wand and we could build tracts of housing, obviously that would fix it. But there's a bunch of inputs that have to happen with regards to that to make it. You have to have space, and we have to have people to build them, and we have to, the building costs and all of the things that come with building these communities.
Yeah, I think government's done a lot of the right things. The provincial government, the provincial government, the federal government, municipality, government's there. They're making the investments. They're creating the programs. The nonprofit sector is also there, and they're doing the work. The reality comes, we just aren't moving fast enough right now. We're still seeing more inflow into homelessness than we're able to take people out of the outflow. So if you imagine, not that we should, but if you imagine everyone experiencing homelessness in a bucket, more people are coming in than we're able to pull them out and match them to housing solutions. Right. That remains to be the biggest challenge. And that's because of years and decades of not investing in the right kinds of housing. So it's going to take years and potentially a decade to build up the right kinds of solutions. The sector's there. There's lots of strong nonprofits. There's lots of for-profit entities also building more housing, which is what we need. We need all kinds of housing. Supportive housing is one piece. Nonprofit housing and affordable housing is one piece. And often market housing that meets people's needs will also be a solution for people. It's just been so long that there hasn't been enough housing to go around. And so, we've relied on the private sector for so long that we didn't invest in the kinds of housing that would kind of tighten the net that catches people if they lose their job or they lose their housing or a health condition makes their cost of living so high that they can't afford to eat and pay rent. We need to build that kind of housing to kind of act as that net. So I'm optimistic government continues to invest in the types of programs. There's a provincial government coming. I hope they don't prove me wrong and slight my optimism, and I'll be watching closely, as will our sector, because this is one place where we can't stop the momentum. So much good has happened and so much good is continuing to happen that if we're able to continue to build more of this housing and more of these solutions, there's an optimism here that we can end homelessness. It doesn't mean that it's not growing or right. That's not the point. The point is we need to have enough of this housing, not just to solve today's problem, but so that in the future we don't have this problem again tomorrow.
This might be a crystal ball question, but do we have any idea how many additional housing spaces that we need? Do you know, is it 500? Is it 1,000? Is it 2,000? Is it 3,000?
Yeah, it's a challenge to kind of put one number on, because the more supportive housing we build, the more people who are appropriately matched to it. And also everyday people are getting housed. I think it's important to note that, right? The system it's not a static bucket. People are being housed every single day, but every day people are showing up looking for help as well. And so it's not just about how much housing we build, it's about how we prevent people from entering homelessness in the first place. It's probably more like a few thousand affordable, deeply affordable and supportive units, some of those supportive units that we need. And again, we're seeing government, with what's happening with the Shannon Park.
I was just going to say Shannon Park might be a good example of that, right?
Yeah, so in that they're looking for, hundreds, potentially 600 more plus units to be built there. Many of those supportive, many of those even affordable, and some of those market. So that's a perfect example of at scale how all groups in government can come together and create an opportunity. We need to see more of that. There's lots of government opportunity. There's lots of opportunity everywhere. And it's just about creating those partnerships and those links and having those champions in our sector and the nonprofit sector, as well as in government to make those opportunities reality for people to find housing.
Michael, always a pleasure to have a conversation with you, and I understand some more work being done on some data, and that's going to come out in the next 6 weeks or so. And when it comes out, stop by again.
Happy to be back next time.
That's Michael Kabalen, the Executive Director of the Affordable Housing Association of Nova Scotia. We're going to take a break. When we come back, could there be labor disruption at NSCAD? A conversation with the president of CUPE 3912, Lauren McKenzie, after the break. Welcome back to the Todd Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrands, and we've talked about labor and universities here in Nova Scotia quite a bit this year, and we saw a bunch of labor disruptions happening and negotiations happening at different universities. I'm thinking of the Mount, and I'm thinking at Dal, and I'm thinking at SMU, and it looks like another one of our post-secondary institutions could be headed that way, bargaining for a first collective agreement between the Nova Scotia College of Art and Design, NSCAD, component of the Canadian Union of Public Employees, Local 3912, and the university itself have reached an impasse after conciliation talks failed late Tuesday night. The 133 academic workers at NSCAD organized with CUPE in 2023 and are now trying to hammer out their first collective agreement. Very pleased to welcome back to the program President of CUPE Local 3912. That's Lauren McKenzie. Lauren, how are you?
Hi, Dan. Happy New Year. I'm good. I'm great. How are you?
I'm well. We're back at it again, it seems.
We are back at it. Yeah, I was happy to hear from you, sort of, but we definitely have lots going on in the local.
Lauren, tell me a little bit about hammering out first collective agreements. This is always a bit of a sticky process, isn't it? It is.
It's a challenge. It takes a long time. And it takes a lot of effort and dedication on everyone's part, but especially, our folks are largely volunteer, and they've been working at this, as you said, since 2023. We've organized several new groups this year. We've organized SMU TAs. They've just recently signed their first collective agreement. Dalhousie Architects have joined us, and the NSCAD. These folks are independent course appointees, research assistants, and teaching assistants, and they are still without a first collective agreement. And it really has been just a very long, protracted session of bargaining here with this employer.
Lauren, what are the sticking points with this first contract?
Yeah, we talked about this with our other members. We talked about job security, clear hiring procedures and practices, job security. Our members are very precarious at NSCAD, and a fair wage for these workers. NSCAD falls behind our other universities, quite significantly in all of these areas. So we're really looking to bring these folks up to a level that is fair and respectable.
Lauren, is this are these some of the issues that you dealt with the other negotiations at the universities in HRM last year?
They are, however, like I said, NSCAD has really lagged behind, Dan. A lot of these members, everyone get ready, they have not had a raise since 1984.
What?
84, yes. They have been, wow. and what that means is that their wage has stagnated so significantly that in order to bring them up to a respectable, living wage has been a really significant effort because they lag so far behind. But we're up for that task. I think you and your listeners know that at this time, CUPE 3912 is up for the task. It seems pretty reasonable to us that we would have members that would make a wage that reflects the century that we're in, the work that they do, what they add to our community, our post-secondary community, and our creative arts, fine arts community. They have so much, they're just such a part of this community. NSCAD is such a huge part of this community. These workers are really, they're out there in the cold, and we are really fighting hard for them.
Lauren, and I don't want to betray any sort of the negotiations at the table, but what's the feeling like? Is there willingness to move on this, or is this a bit of an abrasive event?
Well, we are in, our conciliation failed, Dan, and that says what it says.
Right.
We're very optimistic about a Day 13 meeting, which is happening on March 3rd. We're very optimistic that the employer is going to come with a serious mandate to get a fair deal at the table. We know, like a strike, we know what that looks like. In some ways, I feel like we know, our members know, our community knows. Does our employer know? Because we had some very successful strike job action this year. And we just wonder if NSCAD is paying attention to not only what's going on in, our economy, but also in our labor world, and to sort of get with the program.
Legal strike position as of March the 2nd. Nobody wants to go on strike, but I assume that you have a strong mandate and you will have some sort of job action to back your demands.
Yeah, so we're in legal strike as of March 4th, and we had a very high turnout for our NSCAD strike vote. We had over 70% of members show up, and 90% of those members voted in favor, which is one of the highest strike mandates we've had. They're in a position where they have no guarantee of continued employment. Their courses, their jobs turn over up to 4 times a year. No job stability beyond a single semester. At this point, they're thinking, what do we have to lose with these work conditions? So, yeah, we think that a first collective agreement is absolutely possible, and a first collective agreement that is sustainable for the employer and is fair and dignified for members is absolutely possible, and that's what we are laser focused on.
Lauren, keep us in the loop, okay?
I will. Thanks, Dan, very much for your interest, and thanks to your listeners.
That is Lauren McKenzie, the president of CUPE 3912, which is trying to hammer out a first agreement for the members that it represents at NSCAD University. We're getting ready to take another break here, and on the other side of the break, it's time for our first open hour of the week. And we're going to open up those telephone lines right now. Open hour rules apply, folks. You can bring anything to the table, but I do have a very specific question for you today. It was something I was thinking about over the weekend. As we watch the events at Milan Cortina unfold, the latest edition of the Olympic Games, and of course the numbers will change as we get closer to the end of the event. Canada will add some medals to its total. We know that the women are going to add a medal to the total. We hope it's gold when it comes to hockey. The men, although not guaranteed yet, likely will make the medal round. I hope I'm not jinxing things. But let me ask you this question. How is it that Canada, which is currently in 13th position when it comes to the medal count, we are a Nordic country? Maybe not by definition, but we have the same environment as other Nordic countries. Why is it, do you think, that Canada isn't near the top of the medal count when we come to a Winter Olympic Games? Summertime, I get it, right? There's much more world competition at the Summer Games, and there's so many events, and Canada is a winter sport nation, right? We have a long winter here. Why is it that Norway, who have 29 medals as we speak right now, and are at the top position with 13 golds as well, why is it that Norway can dominate the Winter Olympics and Canada lags so far behind? I'm very interested in your thoughts on this. Just to give you a little bit of stuff to chew on during the news, Norway has a population of 5.65 million people and a gross domestic product of about 500 billion. In comparison, Canada, the last number I saw, was 41.5 million people for a population and a GDP of $2.8 trillion. How is it that Norway is so dominant at the Winter Olympics and Canada is not? 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The open hour after the news.
X.
First open hour of the week. The telephone lines are open. If you'd like to get onto the program, it's easy. Just dial 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Regular open line rules apply. You can talk about whatever it is on your mind. I am curious as to your thoughts on how it is that a country of 5.6 million people, that being Norway, is able to dominate the Winter Olympics and Canada is not. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's begin with Tim. Tim, how are you?
Morning, Dan. How are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind today, sir?
Very good. Now, as for your question, you may want to ask those in the leadership capacity in Canada about the sport and find out what exactly is going wrong, because I think they predict it's 24, and they may be close to halfway there. But that said, the athletes have done incredible. So, calling for two reasons. One, I've listened to the show of counselors about looking for loose change. Again, I was down to the Thunderbird game on Saturday night, and they may want to turn the Christmas tree lights off at some point just to save money. If nothing else, they're asking citizens of HRM to look for ways and means to save money. The leadership should do the same.
Right.
And lastly, the city or the province may want to consider doing something for Mr. Carvery in his recent passing, and I'll leave it at that. Other than that, you have yourself a good day, and we'll talk to you later on.
Appreciate it, Tim. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. If you're curious what Tim was talking about, Mr. Carvery, there was, of course, if you haven't been following the ongoing protest over Africville, Mr. Carvery was a long-time advocate for Africville. In fact, he lived in a trailer there. He wouldn't leave. We know the story of Africville. Was expropriated to build the bridge. The community was raised, and Eddie Carvery was not willing to accept that. He was steadfast in his resolve. He lived in that trailer for many, many years. I had a couple of opportunities to interview him over the years at his trailer. Passed away of cancer. So that's what Tim is talking about. And I know the Africville Society, and let's hope that HRM recognizes the dedication that Mr. Carvery had to that site. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The Christmas tree lights are still on down at City Hall. Isn't that a little bit late? I haven't been down there at night, so I don't know if that's in fact the case, but Tim says it is. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Gary.
Oh, hi. You see a lot of potholes around on the streets a lot this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I call up with a pothole there, and I called her 4 times, the 311. It took them over a month to fix it.
Is it fixed?
Yeah. I had to call the counselor up to get it fixed.
Yeah, there are a lot of potholes this year, isn't there?
Oh, my God, they're everywhere. I don't know they're doing the streets like they don't do the streets like they used to be. A lot of streets I see potholes. My God, they're all over the place.
Right. Thanks, Gary.
Yep.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Council, during their budget discussions, were talking about new technology to uncover potholes. They were talking about put sensors on transit buses in order to get better intelligence. I think that just go talk to drivers because they are certainly everywhere. Let's say hello to Len. Len, how are you?
Good morning there, Dan. How are you today, brother?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
Nice to have a nice long weekend. We've had a long weekend in February. Every Monday, whether it was a holiday or whether it was a snow day.
Right.
We've had every Monday off this month. Anyway, I'm going to say three things to you, and I'll leave it with you and let other callers get on, and you can give me your opinion. First of all, I want to say to you, on the weekend, like yesterday, why do we have to listen to repeats of last week? And then they'll say, well, we're going to give you the forecast now, and they give me the forecast for last weekend. What good is that to me? Wouldn't it be better if they played some nice music on a holiday instead of repeating, the talk shows that we've already heard before? Now, I'll leave that with you. You can give me your opinion why. Secondly, Norway is a northern climate as well, and I would think that is one of the reasons they're more northern than we are, and they do more of skating and probably skiing than probably anywhere in the world. Thirdly, I think if the federal government has another election, it's going to be, I think, a little bit disastrous for them, because I think they might even lose because of what I'm hearing other people saying, because I don't know why, but I hear a lot of people really against Mark Carney. Anyway, I'll leave that with you, and you can give me your opinion on those three things. And by the way, one other thing, the potholes. If they were to repair the potholes properly, instead of just filling them with asphalt, they would last a lot longer. You can't just fill a pothole with asphalt and not think it's going to come back, because asphalt will wash away. Anyway, you have a good day.
Appreciate that, Len. To your point, the reason why there were repeats on yesterday is that this radio station had the day off, and there is the programming option that we have. We are unable to play nice music, as Len would say, by our licensing agreement with the CRTC. And as for the forecast, the weekend forecast, I will look into that, because if it was the wrong forecast, then there was obviously something wrong there. I do appreciate that, Len. To your point on Norway, but we have ice skating rinks here too, right? We got a big, beautiful oval down there. And we're a Nordic country, and we're, 7 times the population of Norway. Anyway, appreciate it, Len. Have a good one. And the potholes, did you see the thing from Anne Murray this weekend? Anne Murray was so upset. She said she was going to, Anne Murray said she was going to get a shovel and some gravel and fix them herself. Let's say hello to Sam. Sam, how are you?
I'm doing well. How are you, Dan?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
First of all, rest in peace to the conciliary and that Carvery gentleman. I'm just learning about him. I'm going to have to look more into that guy, because he sounds like really fascinating
He was a really great interview. I interviewed him a couple of times at his trailer, and he certainly was well knowledgeable, and he was certainly steadfast in his resolve. Yeah,
very respectable. Not a lot of people are that steadfast.
Got it.
Anyway, the reason that I wanted to call in was about this, our provincial government here mandating that all employees return to the office full-time. And we just saw Doug Ford do, the exact same thing in Ontario a month or so ago. First of all, our government has admitted that traffic and congestion in HRM is a massive issue. So if people can work from home, like if it's physically possible for someone to do their job from their house without leaving, without getting on the roads, without causing congestion, without, losing minutes and hours of their lives to a pointless commute, let them do it. Who cares? Some people will say, oh, well, they're not working. They're just, relaxing at home, not doing their job. Okay, if they're not doing their job, then, fire them. But if someone is willing and able to do their job from home, let them do it. Like, what is the issue here? And the hypocrisy from Mr. Ford and Mr. Houston is astounding. Like, Doug Ford mandates that all government employees have to be working in office full-time all year round. And what does he do the next day? He gives himself like a 100-day vacation from legislature. And like Tim Houston, how many days did he spend in legislature last year? Like 10. 30? Yeah. And now he's 10. Okay, 10. And now you're like telling people that they need to be in office. Like, get out of here with that ridiculous hypocrisy.
Sam,
so and I don't work. Yes, you may. I just wanted to say one last thing.
Sure.
My job, I don't have the option to work from home. I work in the trades, but I have no animosity at all towards people who have the ability to do so. I think they should. I think it's better for everybody. What were you going to say, Dan?
Sam, I hear from people on both sides of this issue, right? And one of the questions that I think is a fair argument is that if two people are doing the same job, one person is required, or same type of job, one person's required to be at the office and go through the expense of traveling and childcare and all of that, parking and all of that stuff. Should they make the same as somebody working from home?
If they're being forced to work in office?
Well, they may not have a choice, right? Like, there are some jobs where you just can't. You have to be there.
No. I mean, I think that is it perfectly fair? No. I suppose it's not perfectly fair. Like I just said, don't have that option. But I guess there is a discussion there to be had. Should people be compensated for the commute to and from work? I think that's a reasonable discussion to have. You know, if some people, the only option they have for work is, far away, should they be compensated for their commute? Again, that's not something that I would be opposed to. I think that's a good discussion to have. But I don't know. I think that a lot of the frustration towards people that are able to work from home kind of just comes from jealousy, which I can completely understand. But at the same time, it is the world. There are better ways to do everything, but there is no perfectly fair way to do anything. But I think let's let people work from home if they can.
Thanks, Sam.
Thank you.
Have a good one. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. All right, welcome back. A couple of emails before we head back to the phones. It says, this one comes to us from Todd. It says, good morning. NSGEU employees wishing to work from home is, in my opinion, a futile attempt to make what was a temporary arrangement during the pandemic a permanent lifestyle change for often unrealistic reasons. Sandra Mullen suggested this morning that some members now live at a 150-kilometer commute from their workplace. It's an unfair argument that if an individual decided to make such a drastic change during temporary period, it should not be an excuse from returning to the office. Most people would call that poor planning. I've witnessed work at home government employees from my community at Costco midweek at 10 a.m. It's difficult to make the argument that there isn't some abuse by the work at home program. I fully support the government decision to mandate its employees to return to the office. This one from Rob, it says, I think the province should rethink its requirement for all workers to be back in the office. It doesn't have sufficient rationale as for why this is necessary, and is doing so is certain to make traffic congestion worse and add harmful tailpipe emissions to the atmosphere. In fact, the city and province were serious about reducing traffic congestion and serious about reducing our carbon footprint. They would encourage employees to work from home in instances where it would be doable. That policy cost would be free, would have even savings through reductions in rental office space. Truly a no-brainer. That from Rob. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We say hello to Stephen. Stephen, how are you?
How's it going?
Good. What's on your mind?
Something that's been bothering me for a while. The Privacy of Information Act. This relates to electronic banking.
Okay.
Privacy of Information Act. The government itself, I used to be able to find this all the time on the internet, but for some reason or other the algorithms have changed. Privacy of Information Act, government is not allowed to ask for banking information unless it is involved into a criminal investigation or criminal tax purposes.
Okay.
And yet, you go looking for a job nowadays, and every Tom, Dick, and Harriet can basically ask you for your banking information. Now, we have how many millions of dollars spent on advertisements all across the world saying, don't give out your banking information. And yet, every time we turn around, we have to put our information to these people whose computers are house safe. And yet, if some of us are trying to keep our banking information in our brains and in the bank's computers, but we have to put them all over the planet everywhere for anybody who wants to have that information.
And that would facilitate the employer to do a direct deposit, right? That's what the banking information you're talking about is?
Yep.
Right.
But the thing is there are compromises for that. You could either charge your employee a fee for checks.
Right.
You have payroll cards, which doesn't require the banking information to be applied.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we are told, well, you either have to do this, which is in essence a type of blackmail, because either you give us this information or you don't have a job.
Interesting point, Stephen. Never really thought about that. Appreciate it.
And like I said, it is illegal for you to ask for this information, but we're told you have to give it to us.
Thanks, man. I appreciate it.
Have a good day.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the telephone number if you want to get into the show. I didn't know those other options were available. I knew that you could get a check cut, but employers will tell you that they are extremely expensive to do these days. But I didn't know about the other options if you don't want to give out your banking information. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hello, Donna.
Oh, hi. Thanks for taking my call. I want to start the week off with some good news. Well, I think it's nice. There was a competition here a month or more ago for the under 8 in Nova Scotia, for the under 18 to go to the Nationals, and 4 teams went. They just get back safe and sound, thank goodness. And the boys were Team Lockhart, Team Salzman, Team McAvoy. The girls were Team McAvoy and Team Pemberton. Now, they all had a great experience. The girls, the Nova Scotia girls, they came fourth, but unfortunately the skip was injured by a rock before the final game, whatever. It was just an accident. When they were clearing the stones off, she got hit, and the fifth had to take over.
Right.
Anyway, that was good. So they didn't place, like up in the top, first, second, third. But then they had the teams, the skills competition, and the young boy from New Brunswick won the gold, and young fellow from Team Salzman, happens to be my nephew's son, he won the silver, and so that's good. And the girls placed first too from Nova Scotia. So your New Brunswick and Nova Scotia teams did extremely well. Now I got to tell you this: there's one, and on Team Salzman, the kids on that team are age 11 to 14. So playing against 17, 8-year-olds, they did good. This was the first time. There's one little guy, I got to tell you about him. His name is Jacob. And he's 11 years old. He's not 12. And when he first started playing, when I first saw him playing, I said, well, how come he has a helmet on and then the other kids do? If you're under 12, I guess there's a curling rule. If you're under 12, you have to wear a helmet. So this little guy wears a helmet. But Jacob was after it was all finished, he was the recipient of the Canadian Under-18 Curling Championship Spirit Award.
Yeah,
what a wonderful award for a little 11-year-old kid. He showcased his joy and friendship for curling on and off the ice.
Awesome.
And I think all these kids deserve credit. I call them kids, well, under 18. And on Team Salzman, my nephew's the coach and his son is on the team, the skip. But the kids on that team are 11 to 14. And they've competed with kids like 18 and under. So all of them did very well, and I'm just glad they're all home safe and sound. It was a wonderful experience, and these kids on all these teams from Nova Scotia down the road, they will be in the Olympics. So I just wanted to congratulate them all for everything they did, and they showcased themselves very well.
Thanks, Donna.
Okay, have a good day.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Nova Scotia curling is on the rise. I don't think there's any doubt about that. Just watch some of the performances from our women curlers at the national level, and we're getting ready to watch them at the national level in the men's side after the Olympics are over. And I think plus all of the juniors and championships. Carly Burgess comes to mind. When she, of course, playing for Team Anderson. So Nova Scotia curling certainly is on the rise. We're going to take another break here. The open hour is going to continue on the other side. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We are back after the update.
Axe.
Welcome back. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the telephone number if you want to join the program. Let's go right to the phones and welcome Matthew to the show. Matthew, how are you?
Good. I called last week about the Olympic coverage, voicing I wasn't really happy with it, and I don't think it's really gotten any better. It feels like everything that I see is about hockey, a little bit about curling because there was some drama there.
Right.
But I feel like the Olympics, it just comes down to ratings. I'm not naive to that, but I'd like to see more focus on the amateur athlete. To me, that's what the Olympics are all about. And I don't know. I mean, hockey's cool.
Matthew, what's the definition of an amateur athlete?
Well, good point. See, that's a good question. Someone who's not in the spotlight, 6 months of the year like NHL players is really what I would mean. I mean, if you're paid for something, you're not considered an amateur. And
right.
A lot of these athletes are paid, I'm sure. But, I mean, how many speed skaters can we name? The answer is usually zero.
Right. I understand your point, but you have to be careful when you say, amateurs, because most of Team Canada has funding of some sort.
Well, yeah, okay. They're not amateurs. They're just not well-known athletes. Right. I guess that's but in regards to the other question you said about Norway and how they're, essentially performing much better, I think it just comes down to Canada's huge. I mean, how could anybody here in Halifax or Newfoundland or, I don't know, PEI get into luge or bobsled? I mean, they can't, really. They can go sledding down Citadel Hill maybe, but, I mean, there's no facilities for it. It just comes down to that, where you can't get into that here if you wanted to. If you wanted to go to a bobsled track, you probably got to get on a plane and fly 4 or 5 hours or drive 20 hours. It just doesn't, it doesn't work, right, to gain popularity in such a massive country.
So infrastructure is a problem. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and just availability to the facilities. It's really nobody's fault because Canada's just huge. And if somebody, like I said, who is in a city where there's no bobsled track, and I don't know where there's a bobsled track, you probably don't know either besides Calgary and Vancouver, but let's say someone in Thunder Bay wants to get into it. Well, they got to drive 12 hours to get to it, and it's nothing against these towns, nothing against budgeting. It's just the size of Canada is so big. How could someone in Halifax get into even speed skating? We don't even have a track for that, probably.
Well, we got an oval over on the Common, man. That's what it was there for.
Yeah, but they're not going to train, outdoors all year. It just doesn't work. That's more of a hobby in an area like this, and it just comes down to the size of Canada, and the available facilities to people just aren't there based on the geography of our massive nation. I think people forget how ridiculously big Canada is.
Fair points, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. I don't know if it's still there, but Matthew referenced Thunder Bay, which y'all know is my hometown. And when I was growing up there was a luge track. It wasn't the big bobsled track, but it was a smaller, obviously not to the Olympic standards, but there was a luge track there along with a ski jump and actually 2 ski jump. It used to be the National Training Center for ski jumping until the Calgary Olympics, and then of course Vancouver usurped that. So, but infrastructure, it's money, right? Is that the big problem here? Is that we focus? And somebody sent me an email and says that, I'm paraphrasing, that in Canada, kids play basketball or they play hockey, and in Norway they cross-country ski. And that very well could be it, right? We tend to focus on hockey here. We've got a pretty robust minor hockey system, right? And, well, I'll say it, not a lot else when it comes to the winter sport. So we may have budding cross-country legends here or budding lugers, to use Matthew's point. But we tend to kind of focus on pushing everybody towards hockey, do we not? So hello to Richard. Hello, Richard.
Hi, good morning. I just wanted to say boo-hoo to Sandra Mullins and the Nova Scotia Employees Union and people in that regard.
Okay.
whether it be municipal, federal, provincial. I'd like to know how many times I needed things done and I called or whatever, and when the person wasn't in the office, they're working from home and I had to go back another day. So I'm not in favor of people working from home. People should be working in the office like the old days. And it's been all downhill since COVID. And I've seen countless times. My brother's a contractor. He'll say this exact same thing. And whether it's permits or whatever, and people are working from home yeah, maybe some jobs, but a lot of jobs no. And I want to make another statement. Who's your friend that calls in all the time from the South End? I forget his first name.
Chris? Are you talking about Chris?
Chris, yes. He's an intelligent man, same as Tony used to be. I used to call in all the time, and I miss Tony.
So do I.
But I gave up watching or listening to your show for quite some time, and I'm glad that you do repeats, because when Chris made the statement that he went to Costco, or when he goes to Costco, 90% of the people pulling out their cell phones, well, I thought, oh my God, I can't believe I'm listening to this. Like he's got more hours than to contend with. I said, the days aren't busy enough and I don't have time to listen to this foolishness. We're all fallible, and that was a mistake on his part. And I got a gentleman that's a friend, a former colleague. I'm in my late 60s. I had 17 surgeries over the years, whether it be local or general anesthetic.
Right.
And the last few had half my pancreas and spleen removed, a tumor removed off my spinal cord. I've had complications from the spinal cord surgery that I'm dealing with yet today. And I'm very, very oblivious to things. So if you were to ask me what were those things that I needed, I got no idea. And now I felt like I was getting Alzheimer's or dementia, but I'm told I have anxiety, and make no wonder with everything I've been through that I was told. But anyway, the 89-year-old, he wanted to learn how to text before he left this world, and he thought it was the greatest thing, convenient. My parents are in their late 80s. I'm in my 60s, and they used a flip app, and they encouraged me to use it. And I used a flip app, and it makes even a grocery note for you. So you pull out your phone, and instead of having it on a piece of paper, you lose it. So there's lots of reasons for that. It's you're losing your intelligence as you age, and you learn new things. So, yeah. And like I say, we're all fallible, but I kind of lost respect for Chris when he made that comment.
All right, Richard.
And stopped listening to the show. But I'm back.
Appreciate that.
I'm in favor of employees going back to work.
All right, man. I
Thank you
appreciate
for
that.
my rant. Have a good day. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-825. I don't remember the conversation that Chris had with regards to phones, but I'm guilty of that. I am carrying a list with me all the time, and most of the time I put it on my phone. So I agree with Richard on that with regards to why I use the phone at the grocery store. We're going to take our last break here. Then we're going to try to get to as many calls as we can. If you're on hold, I'll try to get to you. We're going to be back in 2 minutes. Open hour continues, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's go to Brian. Brian, how are you?
Hello, how are you?
I'm good. Appreciate you holding so long. What's on your mind?
Oh, that's okay. So, did you know that back in the day, they used to walk uphill to work in the snowstorm?
With their grandfather's slippers on, apparently.
Exactly. So, I think it was just Richard on there a moment ago. When's the last time Richard had to commute to work? He sounded pretty retired to me. I don't want to judge, but I just to be clear, I've called in about this before. Right. I'm a federal employee. I'm being mandated back to the office just like anyone else, and my commute is already rough as it is. But I'm not calling it as a federal employee. I don't actually care about going into the office. I can still do my job 100% from home. What I'm calling in, though, is a very angry taxpayer. Because I don't think, the thing that's not being discussed is the amount of incredible waste that is taking place in both the provincial and federal governments to put offices out there for individuals that can 100% be doing their job from home. I'm not going to get into more details, but my office is an office for 200 plus people. There's not 200 of us left. And I can guarantee you that the federal government is paying $10,000 to $20,000 a month for the leaseholds of my office. The amount of people that go into my office, 15 maybe. So you as a taxpayer are paying $10,000 to $20,000 a month so that I can go into the office. I'm another body on a bus, another car on the road, taking up space and commuting, just so I can go into the office and go on a Teams meeting with people in Ottawa, which I can 100% do from home.
Brian, can I ask you very quickly, Brian, if they gave you the option to work from home but at a reduced rate, would you do it?
Yes, I would. Because not only would it save me 4 hours a day in commuting, that's 4 hours of my life back, then I wouldn't have to pay for gas. I wouldn't have to pay for parking. I wouldn't have to pay for a lunch occasionally. Like, I bring my lunch with me. I'm not supporting anyone downtown.
Right.
It's useless. But one last thing. What I was trying to get at was that a lot of people that are calling in and complaining about people who are upset about going into the office, they're not understanding. I'm working just as hard at home as I would be in the office. That's the idea of, like, I want people to go back to work. You're looking at that the wrong way. What you want for some reason is to go back to this old idea, this old concept that you have to physically be in a spot to work. These are also the same individuals that may look at people who work on a computer and be like, well, all you do is sit on a computer all day. You're not working. We don't have that kind of work anymore. It's 2026. One last thing. Before, when COVID happened, both the federal and provincial government spent millions, and I mean it possibly even into the billions, to make it so that we could work from home. Everybody needed a laptop. Everyone needed a cell phone. Various security systems needed to be installed. That bill is still paid. Like, me going into the office doesn't give us that money back. All of that money's already been spent. I still have to take my laptop to the office because there's nothing at the office anymore. It's literally a chair and a desk that I sit at, put my laptop down, and do the same thing I do at home.
Appreciate the perspective, Brian. Thanks for calling.
Hello?
Are you still there?
Oh, I think I got disconnected.
I can't hear Brian, so I'm going to hang up, Brian. It's my mistake. Maybe there's something going on with the phones. That's kind of scaring me. Anyway, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Good points from Brian. He does say that if it was offered to him to work from home but at a reduced rate, he'd do it. And I wonder if that might be something that more people might be interested in doing moving forward. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Hopefully the phone works. Shelley, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
All right, there you are. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
I was going to call regarding what we're just talking about, just to make a point on your last caller.
Mm-hmm.
I'm real curious. He's on duty right now, so did he take time out of that duty to call you? That's an interesting question.
Okay.
So, was he at the office? If he was at the office, he probably wouldn't be able to do that.
Many people that are working call my show, though, Shelley.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's okay. But my point is, I was wondering about the previous. There's a couple of callers called about the travel time. My question is, when these people first started with this, because of COVID, they start to work from home. Were they told up front that this was going to be forever? I don't think anybody was told that.
Probably not. At least I'm using myself as an example that it was always. I mean, for the first bit, we were going on and on about, coming back week after week, and then it was months, and then it was 6 months, and then it was a year, and you know what I mean?
Yeah, exactly. So if they were told up front that this is just temporary, if they took it in their own head to move where they have to travel 2 hours to get to work, then that is their issue, not the public. They made that decision themselves to move outside the city where they have to travel further. Now, all of a sudden, they have to go back to work. They're expecting taxpayers to flip in and pay it. No, they were told up front that this was not permanent. So if they made that decision to move outside the city, then that's their problem. And one other thing I'd like to speak is any public service. I worked for the public service years ago. Any public service, when you go to work to begin with, you swear an oath. And in that oath, there's public. You are serving the public. If you're home, relaxing, having a coffee, enjoying your home, watching television, you're not serving the public. So I am deadly against working from home. They should all be forced back to work or simply quit.
All right, Shelley. Thank you.
Thank you.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We say hello to Steve. Steve, how are you?
Hello. I'm fine. How are you, Dan?
I'm good. What's on your mind, sir?
Good. Just a little bit on the Canada and the Winter Olympics.
Sure.
Actually, we have done extremely well in the Winter Olympics for the last 4 or 5 Olympics. Back in 2010, we actually ended up in first place.
Yeah, that's because we spent a ton of money because it was in Vancouver, right?
Oh, sure. There's no doubt about it. And there is also an advantage that you have when it's your home court. But we ended up in third place the next Olympics, and we ended up in third place the Olympics after that.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the bottom line is, try to compare us to Norway. Norway beats everybody.
Why?
Norway tends to. I think it's probably because they probably have worse weather than we do in the winter. How about that as the reason? But we actually do. And even in our overall medal count, like they sort of rank them to start off with by how many gold medals you win.
Right.
But our overall medal count, we're always, for the last 4 or 5 Olympics, we've always been in the top 3 or 4 in terms of medal count as well. So we actually do quite well as a country. So I just wanted to pass that along to you.
Appreciate it, Steve.
Okay, bud. Bye-bye.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. If you want to join the program, you certainly can. We're almost out of time. However, I think we just kind of hit the nail on the head when it comes to why Canada and why Norway is dominant when it comes to these Winter Olympics. And it's twofold. One, they have the infrastructure in place in Norway. And 2, we are just absolutely laser focused on hockey in this country. Absolutely laser focused. And we have been for many years. We could be third place or fourth place or whatever it is in this Olympics. And tell me this, would it be considered a successful Olympics if Canada does not win gold in men's hockey? It's the marquee event in this country, there is no doubt. Just take a look at the coverage it gets. How many people curling? Everybody thinks that Canada is the curling nation. Yet, the host broadcaster, the CBC, didn't even send their broadcast team to Italy for that event. They're calling that from Toronto. Hockey is king. And that's where the money goes. That's where the infrastructure is. That's why it is the marquee event at the Olympic Games. There's no reason at all that Canada should not have a world-class cross-country skiing program. There's no reason in the world that Canada should not have a world-class biathlon program. There's no reason in the world that Canada, and I think we just won a medal in speed skating, but should not be more dominant in speed skating than we are. Short track. We're certainly good at moguls. We're certainly good at freestyle, or as I like to call it, the hot dog events, because that's what they called it when I was growing up. Kirk just sent me an email. He says the only Olympic medal that matters to Canada is a gold medal in hockey. And that's why, folks, we don't have as many athletes in as many events as Norway does. Norway's 5.5 million people. And they're able to dominate the Winter Olympics. It's interesting, isn't it? Thank you to everyone who dialed the numbers and joined the program. I appreciate it. We're getting ready to take another break here on the program. And when we come back, it's Tuesday, so that means we're going to switch things up. Maybe we'll ask Dr. Rob about the science of cross-country skiing. We talked about ski jumping last week. Maybe cross-country skiing is the one this week. Science Files is here. It's ready to go. Dr. Rob will be here to answer your questions. If you have a science-related question you'd like Dr. Rob to take a shot at, 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the update.
Facts.
All right. It's time for Science Files, folks. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. That is the question. That is the number. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Dr. Rob Thacker from St. Mary's University in the house to answer those questions. Dr. Rob, we've been having this persistent cold weather.
Yep.
And I was telling the folks earlier in the show today that this weekend was the first time that it feels like in forever, that I was able to go outside without my toque on and had a ball cap on instead. Maybe it's like the first Robin of the season for me. I don't know. When you're follically challenged like I am, the cold temperatures
you need something to keep your head warm.
Right.
Is that what you're trying to say?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The insulation layer is gone there. And I know we were chatting off the air about the freeze and thaw, and I was looking out my window this weekend. It's now since gone, but there was a rather large, like I'm talking huge, icicle that was forming from my roof. Tell me a little bit about how that, we know that water freezes from the top down, right? We talk about that?
Yeah, but this is more about basically why is water that's snow actually turning into ice and so on. And so this is really a product, and anyone who works in the roofing industry knows this, that when you have an attic space, if you have heat leaking up because you don't have enough good insulation, then particularly around the edges of the house where most of the heating is, right, you'll actually create a warm space, and that will melt stuff, right, fairly quickly. And so if you end up having a melt and then that flows down onto your gutter, which is then actually quite cold, that will end up turning from water into ice, and you'll build up an ice dam. And so anyone who's been looking around at roofs recently will have seen that there are a lot of serious ice dams around right now. And I'm just going to put my hand up and say, yeah, we got one too.
Right.
So I've been having to manage that a little bit, which is quite tricky, because once you have a big ice dam, you're not going to melt it. And whatever you do not try and use a blowtorch. There are so many stories of people using blowtorches on ice dams, and you end up creating fires. Please, please, please do not do that. Right. But you can actually do things like don't put salt on your roof. That's a really bad idea. Use one of the sort of more modern calcium chloride substitutes. That won't damage your roof quite as much. And you can do old tricks, like there's putting stockings up there full of de-icer, just hanging that over the edge will create a channel. Right. And then actually it worked for me. It literally created a channel, and we actually got stuff to drain down through that. So yeah, but the real solution is don't have a roof that creates ice dams. And the solution for that is literally make sure you have enough insulation around the edges of the house in particular, but you also allow the cold air to come up through the soffit. And you can use, they're the little sort of like pink sheets that you can put underneath that will trap the cold air right underneath the roof and won't allow the warm air to get in there, and that will stop everything melting in the first place. So I know that I didn't get around to doing that, and now I've paid the price for it. So,
Rob, when it comes to ice dams, I think we all understand that, but like when an icicle forms from that dam, usually it starts with a rather large base and then it tapers. Is that because the water, by the time it gets to the tip of the icicle, is cold enough that it freezes and it creates that spear point kind of thing?
It's literally, I think, well, this is my interpretation of it. You've got a competition between how quickly something is cooling, right, versus how far it's going to get down the actual icicle itself, right? So if it's cooling really quickly, then it's not going to go down very fast. So, for example, this morning, literally nothing had really grown in terms of the icicles on the roof of the house because it was reasonably cold last night. Whereas if you then, on the other hand, have things where you're literally warm enough to get the flow going and then it's going down and then it's in contact with this cold medium, then eventually it is going to freeze, right? And so you basically need to have enough warmth to get things dripping down and enough cold to be able to refreeze them. You need those two combinations. It's kind of funny because it was clearly noticeable when I saw the dam as it was. There were, in fact, two dams, right? There had clearly been one event and then another one that had come over the top of it, which was kind of incredible to see.
Water is a fascinating thing, isn't it? Although damaging.
In this case, yes. I need new gutters for sure. So, but no, the water and its capacity to expand as it freezes or below 4C is really quite incredible, right? And that's probably a big factor. Well, probably. A lot of people think it's a big factor in the creation of life and so on. So where there's water, though, there could well be life.
Fair enough. And just like on Mars.
Yep. So if we go back far enough, right? Mars did have an ocean, as all the evidence points to that. But did enough things happen on Mars to be able to get life going? Yeah, who knows? Probably,
to be determined.
In my opinion, probably not. But that's just an opinion. That's not based upon any true amount of scientific knowledge. To be fair.
The other science of a Nova Scotia, particularly an HRM winter, is the science of the pothole, Rob. And we know that this year's there's an and this is not even just my opinion. This is from the city that there's an abnormally large amount of potholes. I was under the impression that potholes were created when there was that cycle of freeze-thaw
cycle. Yeah, me too.
But we've had this winter has been I'm not going to maybe abnormally cold or colder than normal, and we haven't had as much freeze-thaw this year as we have seen last year or the year before. There's been no freezing rain. There's been no significant days other than this past weekend that were above zero. But do we still get freeze thaw? And does salt play a role in that?
Exactly, right. I was going to say salt is the key thing here, right? So even though on your house you may not have a freeze thaw cycle, once you throw salt into the mix, then you're actually going to get that on the roads quite frequently. And so that's really when you start seeing the problem. So people probably remember, to begin with, we didn't get a lot of salt down, right? And then when things started getting bad, we got a lot of salt down, right? The roads are basically white everywhere. And now I could be dreaming, admittedly. I'd have to sit down and look at the evidence for this. But that was my impression of when things started getting bad on the roads, right? And so, yes, this is a little bit like 2015, if everyone can remember 2015.
Oh, my goodness. How to forget that?
Right. I mean, that's what that buy stock in body shops, right? Because there was so much business because of that. I remember talking to a taxi driver who said when everything was melting, I drove into what I thought was a puddle and it was actually 2 feet deep and I just totaled my front end. Right. So, it's an issue. I thought so when we hit I genuinely hope we don't get a lot more snow. Right, I genuinely hope that. So if we can melt this and then not get a lot more, we'll actually be okay, right? We can probably do enough fixing with just temporary fixes that the roads will be okay. But if we carry on like we did in 2015, anyone remembers 2015, the snow went on into March, right, through to about the last week of March, as I know. And then we even got a dump in April too.
We did.
Right. And so that was really bad. In fact, we were joking at how you could date the snowfalls from all of the layers you could see on the side of the road.
It's like how they date the Precambrian shield.
Yeah, exactly. So I sincerely hope we don't get that because we could really do without that because it's a nightmare on the roads.
And the snowplows don't help the matter, right? When they're dragging their blades to plow the streets, and if there's anything that's just a little bit loose, it
they're going to bust it. Yeah.
And then it creates a pocket. Then the salt gets in there. Then we have the freeze-thaw thing, and water expands when it freezes, like you told us, and that's what creates the potholes. And there are some monsters out there. And kudos, at least, to the city crews that on my commute in, they've been out. I've seen some of them that were car eaters, and those have been at least temporarily patched. But is it? And this might be a tough one to answer, but we pave our streets with asphalt, right? And that's one of the cheaper ways to do that. Do you think that there's a better solution?
I don't know, not that I'm aware of, because whatever you do, I mean, if you use concrete, for example, everyone's saying, hey, try concrete. But
and then it expands and it shifts, right?
You have to have the expansion gaps, so you've got the issues there. So, and then as soon as it cracks, you're going to have water in the cracks. So you can't win, because any surface that does have some kind of nature of fracturing is going to have this problem, right? So it's not an easy one to solve. And right, realistically, there's probably different ways you can allow for expansion, right? I'm sure you can have different types of asphalt mixtures that will cope with that differently. But at the end of the day, I haven't seen any particular road technology that seems to be immune from this.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This is Science Files. If you have a question for Dr. Thacker, here's your chance again. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're back after the break. Welcome back. Science Files is in the house. Dr. Rob is here. 902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. That is the number. Dr. Rob, we just, as you and I were chatting, Canada has defended its Olympic crown in women's team pursuit speed skating.
Well done, Team
Ivani
Canada.
Blondin, along with Isabelle Wiedemann and Valerie Malte, winning the gold medal in the Tuesday pursuit event. Now, if you've watched the pursuit event and you've watched some of these speed skating events that are team events, there's a lot of what they call drafting that goes on, Rob. That's where you line up in a line, and anybody that watched the Daytona 500 on the weekend saw this in effect. They lined up three wide, and they were drafting off of each other that way. Can you explain, I mean, the easy explanation for how drafting works and why it's more efficient?
Sure. So you've got a situation where to go fast, anyone who's ridden a bike knows that the faster you go, the harder it gets, right? And so there's an issue with air resistance, right? And so the air resistance that you feel goes up as your speed squared, right? And so if you're going through the air, you are, in fact, breaking it up and making it flow around you, right? You have to do that to go through the air, right? Because it's not moving and you are going through it, so it's got to move to go around you. And so when you do that, right, you create a layer that actually comes off your back and then doesn't actually fully reform until a bit of a way behind you, right? And in that sort of like area where it isn't properly reforming the flow, you've got lower pressure, right? So if you can get into that area and actually follow behind something very close, then you're going to feel actually less air resistance, because there's literally almost like a pocket of air that's moving along behind the system, right? A lower pressure pocket. And so if you can get into that, great. You can draft, as it were. I mean, I don't recommend people doing this on the roads because it's dangerous, point blank. It is dangerous, right? And so for cycling, it's used all the time in the peloton. Pursuit cycling in particular, when they go wheel to wheel, which freaks me out, but they do it all the time.
And I mean, NASCAR, they do 200 miles an hour, and they're on while they're hitting each other's bumpers.
Yeah, and just as we were sort of like briefly mentioning, I mean, I find NASCAR kind of crazy because when you compare to Formula One, where you have enormous amounts of downforce, right? So much so that people have estimated that if you drove a Formula One car upside down at 200 miles an hour, it would stay where it is going along upside down because it has that much downforce. Whereas with NASCAR, right, you have some, of course, but you don't have the same level, right? And they're heavier cars as well. So once they sort of lose traction and get any kind of air underneath them, wow, that's basically a glider ready to take off.
So the way that it looks to me, looking at pictures of the draft, it kind of looks like a teardrop, right? You're breaking that wind, and then it kind of flows over you. And the idea is you get in behind that, into that lower pressure, and then you don't have to use as much thrust.
Exactly.
To maintain speed, right?
There's various estimates that have been done. I mean, I think it's something like 30 to 40% less energy to stay at the same speed, which is why once you get into that, you can feel like, I mean, I've done this cycling myself with friends and so on. You feel like, oh, wow, this is really easy, right? Because you're using so much less energy. So you have to sort of like dial it back a little bit. Certainly when the person behind the lead cyclist, they're dialing it back, conserving their energy, and then they're ready to go when that person flips to the back.
And in the NASCAR example, when they are using less energy to maintain speed, they're able to get up and touch the vehicle in front and then push them, which creates more speed. But as anybody that watched the race saw on Sunday, it also has another effect.
Yeah, no, seriously. Any kind of situation where you are shunting someone does not sound like safety as your first
Especially at 200 miles an hour.
No, that's crazy. Sorry, that's absolutely crazy. I mean, one of the interesting things is the real changes in F1 this year. So they're looking at a situation where you have to conserve energy, right, to go into the batteries and so on. So this is going to be a big part of that, I'm sure. I mean, drafting in F1 obviously is a big issue already for going into corners and things like that. But this is going to have even more of an issue as they talk about how to manage the energy balance between the electric and the gasoline-powered part of it.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let's say hello to Tim. Tim, how are you?
Hey, guys, pretty good. The question is, so over in Russia, Ukraine, Elon Musk kicked Russia off the Starlink system. What are they going to be able to do to be able to replace that, and how long will it take?
So, I mean, I don't honestly know off the top of my head without sort of looking at what Russia has been doing, what they're precisely using it for. Like in terms of actually doing basically bomb sighting and so on, there are obviously GPS systems that they can use, right? So it's not going to impact that. If they're using it for frontline communications, then presumably they can go again to alternative systems. They won't have as good a coverage as Starlink. Starlink will tend to have more bandwidth. That's going to be an issue for them. But in terms of being able to still communicate, then yeah, they're going to be able to do that. But there's always more that you can do if you have more bandwidth, and that's the main thing.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Tim. I appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Say what you will about Elon Musk, and obviously people are on either side of if they like Elon or not. That being said, Starlink is a game changer, right? Because now people are able to be connected anywhere on the planet and reasonably inexpensively.
Yeah, this is a really challenging conversation, right? Because the thing that comes to mind for me is why, right? How many people truly benefit from being able to use the internet anywhere they are on the globe? Right? That's a small number of people, like seriously, a small number of people. So if you're selling it on the basis of that, that's not really a good enough reason to sell it. Right, because there's literally only a few people who are just traveling around everywhere and so on and need internet access all over the world. And it's pizza box access anyway, right? So you've got to have a thing that you carry around with you, right? So that's not necessarily good. I mean, it's not like direct to satellite, right? Because that's coming, which is insane, right? Sorry to be the astronomer in the room, right? But these things are going to have areas of 450 meters, so they're going to have tons and tons of radio emissions as well as basically big flares of light on a regular basis. But anyway, so yeah, I'm not. It's not that I'm anti-satellite internet in any sense. I'm not. It's just that I find many of the marketing reasons for it to be really not accurate. Right.
From a Nova Scotia perspective, there are many people that have had not been able to access any kind of speed when it comes to internet outside of the cities. So it gives, and I know the provincial government has been working to try and rectify that. But these pizza boxes, and that's exactly what they look like, give them the opportunity to access high speed.
I'm just going to say it again, right? And I actually have talked to the government about this in Nova Scotia. So what you've got to remember is Starlink is not something that's going to work in all weather, right? So Starlink doesn't work when you have really, really big water columns. So when you have really, really, really tons and tons of rain, Starlink is not going to be the thing that works really reliably for you, right? Now, it can frequency shift a little bit to try and get around that, but it's still not going to be particularly reliable when it's really bad weather. So if you want something that's reliable, right? People will say, well, what about the power? That's not reliable. Fair point. Totally get that.
Especially in Nova Scotia.
Yeah, exactly. Fair point. But it's just not. Whereas something that's wired, whether it's fiber optic or cable, right, that's going to be more reliable in that sense, right? So I've said that if you need something that is basically has some level of reliability during emergencies, right, then you're either going to be limited to wired internet or basically using your cell phone to the nearest tower. And as we all know, cell phones to the nearest towers have a habit of going down, as does the internet, right? So nothing's perfect. I mean, it annoys me a little bit that in the UK, and people will say, why are you using the UK as an example? And this is because of the Cold War, right? That the telephone infrastructure in the UK was taken very, very seriously. And so if there was any kind of power loss, right, they actually had massive battery backups all over the country, right? I actually got to see this when I was working for them. I didn't actually have to sign the official secrets, but they were like, we can't go in that room over there, right? But anyway, so the telephone system has or is still taken very seriously in the UK as an emergency backup, right? But we don't have that here, right? And we saw when we've had a series of storms and cells goes down, right? We're literally kind of left, what are we going to do? And occasionally people are turning on the radio. But if the power goes out, the radio is not going to work.
Unless you have a battery-powered radio.
Right. Sure, if you have a battery-powered radio. But then what's the generator here that we have?
Oh, we do. Yes, but generators are fallible, and generators can run out of fuel. And it certainly can, anything that has an electric, anything that plugs in is susceptible, right?
Yeah. So this is the thing. Like, I do think that we should be more serious in relying upon landlines, because they do give you a level of reliability that mobiles don't, right? But unfortunately in Canada, it's never been that serious because, to be frank, I mean, being right next to the States, okay, you can say we're right next to Russia as well, which is true, right? But there's never been the same kind of commitment, as far as I'm aware, to keeping the landline telephone infrastructure going under circumstances of war as there is in the UK.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to take a break for the news. Dr. Rob's here till the top of the hour. If you have a science question, good opportunity to get it answered. Again, 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We are back after the update.
Axe.
All right, welcome back. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. This is Science Files. He is Dr. Rob Thacker, and he is here to answer your questions. And we'll go right to the phone lines and welcome Brian to the show. Brian, how are you?
Hey, I'm good. Thank you guys so much for taking my call.
Sure, your question, please.
I'm calling. My 10-year-old son wanted me to call in. He's in school today, so he's going to have to listen back later when school's done.
Okay.
But he did. My son Lucas, he wanted me to call in and ask if you were to take all the nuclear weapons on the planet, fire them all directly at the sun, would it make the sun any hotter? Would it have any effect on the sun at all if all of our nuclear arsenal were sent to the sun? So shout out to Lucas. I'll hang up and let you answer. Thank you so much.
Appreciate it, Brian. Hello, Lucas.
Yeah. Hey, Lucas. So this is the plot of the movie Sunshine, isn't it?
I think so.
Right, and so they're basically trying to restart the sun by flying a bunch of nukes into it. And the long and the short of it is, you might have a sort of very, very minor impact on the surface of the sun for a very, very short period of time. But ultimately, putting a nuclear weapon into the sun is not going to have that much of an impact, right? Because you're literally looking at something that creates a temperature that is quite a bit larger than the surface of the sun. But what you have to remember is, and this is the key difference, when you launch a nuclear weapon in space versus launching it in the actual atmosphere, the impact of it is much, much, much less significant, right? This often surprises people. So you do have more electromagnetic stuff come out of a nuclear detonation in space. But in terms of the actual what we call percussion effect, right, the shock wave that everyone who's seen nuclear weapons test footage will know that shock wave comes out and does huge amounts of damage. You don't actually have that when you're in space, right? So
is that because there's no air?
Exactly. Right, there's no air. Right, so all you have expanding out is the basically particle dosage, right, and all of the material that was in the bomb, which actually isn't that much. Right, so there's a ton of energy going into small particles, but there's none of that percussive shock. Right, so it's kind of funny. I know more about this than I really should from playing role-playing games as a kid, right? But scientists actually worked out that having nuclear missiles in space is not a particularly good weapon to have if you want something that's particularly destructive. They're destructive once they actually put the shockwave into a structure, but if you just have them explode away from something, they're not actually as dangerous as it would be if there was an explosion in the atmosphere.
Not to mention you'd have to get the delivery vehicle close enough to the sun to have an impact, and the sun gets real hot real quick, right?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, yeah, it's. I would love to be able to sit down and actually do the calculation of the number of ergs of energy difference, like it's going to be an enormous difference, right? So the sun, basically by the time it gets to the Earth, sunlight is giving you about 1,000 watts per square meter, and you've got a lot of square meters where the Earth is, right? That tells you how much energy there is in the sun. And, if you want to put that in perspective, people may remember Trump said, well, we've got a hurricane coming, can't we fire some nukes at it and knock it off course? You can't even do it to a hurricane, right? So if you can't do it to a hurricane, you certainly aren't going to have a big impact on the sun.
Is that before or after the president of the United States said, well, if you just rake the forest, you wouldn't have forest fire?
I have no idea.
902-405-6000 or 1-877-801-8255. Let's welcome Rafe to the program. Rafe, how are you?
Good, how are you?
I'm good. What's on your mind?
I just wanted to ask a question. I've heard this before, and I know it exists. I just want to know what's going on. It's the Doppler effect.
Mm-hmm.
How does...
What's the Doppler effect?
No, I know what it is. Why does it happen?
Okay, sure. It's funny because I just taught this in first year special relativity. So what's happening when you get the Doppler effect is, right? So say you've got, let's do it with sound, right? So let's do the easier version than doing it with light and relativity, right? So you've got sound, right? So sound is a compression wave, right? And what's happening as you come towards someone, anyone who knows the siren of the ambulance coming towards you is higher. So it's a wah, 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 and then as it goes away, it's wah, 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 wah. Okay. And so as it's coming towards you, what's happening is the distance between the peaks of the compression, right? Because you're sort of like catching up with the one that's already gone out, they're spaced closer together. So the frequency goes up, right? When you go away, you've got the opposite thing happening. You've got the sound is coming back to you where you're standing, right? But where it's coming from is being stretched out. So the wavelength is being made longer, right? And that's the key difference. As it's coming towards you, everything's compressing, frequency's going up. As it goes away, everything's being stretched, frequency's going down, right? And that's why it happens.
And with light as well?
Yeah, it does happen with light, right? It's a little bit more complicated with light if you want to do it at very high speeds, but it's exactly the same idea.
Oh, okay. So it's got to do because it's a wave, it's compressed.
You got it. Yeah, it's the compression of basically the wavelength that's doing it at the end of the day. Well, in relativity, people might get upset with me and they say, you have to do the analysis in terms of the time taken and so on, which is true, but we can talk about the compression of the frequency or the wavelength to give a high frequency.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Rafe. Appreciate it. So when I hear Doppler, I immediately think of radar, and I think of weather radar for Doppler. Is that a different?
Yeah, presumably you can. I should know this, but I'm guessing that's inferring that as you get the reflection back to you, you have a change in frequency, so you can establish how the thing is moving.
Right,
yeah.
So it's more accurate.
Yep.
902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Here's one for you, Dr. Rob. Comes to us from Joseph over the email. It says, good morning, afternoon, Dan and Dr. Thacker. I have an astrophysics question.
Sure.
What is a weakly interacting massive particle, or WIMP, in short?
Okay, so these are entirely hypothetical, right? And so weakly interacting massive particle means it is a subatomic particle that in the spectrum of subatomic particles is on the heavy side, right? So that's where the massive comes from. Weakly interacting means that it doesn't interact with other material except largely through the gravitational interaction. Now, there has to be some kind of particle physics reaction for it to be made in the first place, but the overall point of a weakly interacting massive particle is it's weakly interacting. So it doesn't really interact with things other than through, well, today at least, it doesn't interact other than through primarily gravitational interactions, which are extremely weak, right? And so if you have that, then all it's going to do is kind of sit there in the background while everything else is doing its stuff, and literally it's just floating around and not doing very much, right? It's just creating largely a gravitational interaction. Now, there will, again, be some small amount of particle physics that it can do, but that's not going to have a very significant impact on the day-to-day.
So it's kind of wimpy.
Yeah, that's kind of, in a funny kind of way, I think that is a situation where people came up with the acronym first and then decided we better find
something that matches
fits.
it?
Yeah, exactly.
Fair enough. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. We're going to take our last break, and we'll head back to the phones. You're listening to Science Files on the Todd Veinotte Show. I'm Dan Olstrand. We're back in minutes. All right, welcome back. Closing minutes of Science Files for this week. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. That is the telephone number. Quickly, before we go to the phones, somebody has a follow-up question, Dr. Rob, to what we were talking about with the Doppler effect. Mm-hmm. And it comes to us from Josh, and it reads, assuming the shortest distance between two things is a straight line, then why do things like sound waves travel as a wave and not direct in a straight line?
Oh, okay. There's a little bit of confusion over how a sound wave is traveling. So sound waves are compression waves, right? So they are literally compression in the direction that it's moving. And so it can travel in a straight line. That compression can travel in a straight line, right? So that's, even though it's called a wave, and when we draw a wave, we think of something going up and something going down and so on. But really, that wave can still travel in a straight line. And in fact, when you have a explosion, right, and create a sound wave, that's going out basically in a sphere in every direction around
365.
You, right? All of those, funnily enough, are kind of straight lines from where it was created.
Right.
Right. And so the last thing I do want to say about this, the straight line isn't always the shortest distance.
Here comes the physics.
No, so that's something called geodesic theory. Oh, this is cute because it's general relativity, right? And so, in fact, when you have a curved space-time, you will find that the shortest distance between two places is curved by space-time. So it's no longer a straight line, although if you travel on it, ironically, it will feel like a straight line.
Heavy stuff, Dr. Rob. Let's welcome Carl to the show. Carl, how are you?
Hey, not too bad, guys. How you doing?
Good. What's on your mind?
I was just wondering, Dr. Rob, there, if you could... what your thoughts are on why geothermal isn't more broadly used on the planet.
That's a good question. So geothermal is actually fairly big in the UK. And so that's ground source geothermal, right? And so that's something where you're going to use a heat pump. You're running water pipes, or not necessarily water. I shouldn't say water. There'll be a fluid pipe. And you'll run that down into the ground, potentially as deep as like 200 feet. And then you'll use that as your heat sink, right? So you can run it for cooling in the summer and you can run it for heating in the winter. So that's one of the great things of heat pumps. So that is pretty common. It's pretty expensive, though. And that's one of the things. Like, if you're going to have someone come in and drill down, you're going to be paying quite a bit of money for that. And I think that's one of the drawbacks. Whereas air source heat pumps, which are obviously pretty common now, right? You just attach them to the house, right? And that is a lot more practical in terms of cost than drilling down 200 feet, especially if you've got a lot of rock like we have in Nova Scotia as well.
Yeah, I'm just thinking like for carbon neutral or whatever, and big push for that and everything, that we have this incredible heat source that's, maybe a kilometer or 3 kilometers underground. Why we're not getting into that more?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it is literally the challenge in accessing it, right? It's like I said, with air source heat pumps, you probably get most of the way there with a fairly straightforward installation. With ground source, if you're in a place where you actually do have a large sort of like overlayer of true soil as opposed to rock, then you can actually put something in there and do that. That's because that's going to give you exactly what you want, right? But if you don't have that, certainly where I am, I'm on top of some serious rock. My neighborhood basements were all dynamited back in the 50s and 60s, right? And we're just not going to be drilling down through that. I can tell you that straight off.
How big a hole do you need to drill, Dr. Rob?
Not very big, right? Because you've only got to run the piping down. They do a spiral pipe as well, so you create a fairly large surface area. So it isn't actually that big. Some of them will do shallower installations, but everyone will know that with the frost line being like legally, it's like declared as 4 feet or something like that in Canada. I can't remember precisely. Should remember my building code. But you've got to get considerably down beneath that. Whereas in the UK, if you're in a warmer area, then they'll probably go down like 6 or 8 feet and lay it that way.
Would this have in Canada, because of that expense, would this have maybe the potential for a more of an industrial heat source rather than a residential heat source?
Yeah, if you can find somewhere where for example, if you have a lot of supply of geothermal, and so the classic example will be anywhere where you have geysers, right? So anywhere where you have hot springs and things like that, then you know that there is a place where the water is coming through that's heating it significantly, right? And then you can probably drill in and access that. So there's been done in places like Hawaii, where there's obviously a lot of thermal resources there because of all the volcanoes and so on. And so, yeah, you can imagine doing that. It's a fairly well understood technology, right? It's not like there's any true sort of like really difficult things to work through. So it's just a question of whether you have the resources.
Thanks, Carl. Appreciate it. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. Let us say hello to David. David, how are you?
Oh, well, thank you. Hi, Doc. Just actually a quick question about relative humidity. I'm not sure I understand the concept so well. So by way of example, let's say you have like a sealed environment, closed room or whatever, and at sort of 20 Celsius, the relative humidity is 30%. Then let's say the temperature rises to 25% humidity. Would you expect the relative humidity to then go up or down?
So I'm assuming a relative humidity, and you've caught me on something that I would have to look up to be 100% certain, but if you have a certain water vapor that can be held in the air and you're measuring it as a relative amount relative to what that maximum is, then yes, it will go up as the temperature of the water goes up. That would be my expectation.
Okay. So, So like basically the air could hold more.
As it gets warmer, you can hold more water in the air. Okay. That's why with climate change we get heavier rainfall. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not actually like a measure of the amount of water in the air kind of thing.
I would presume not. I mean, you caught me on something again where I'd have to read, because if it's a percentage, right, you have to have a percentage of something.
Yeah, okay. No, that makes sense. And because my sort of reference was the sort of sealed environment and stuff like that. But I'm just sort of curious to sort of, preserving, like old books and stuff like that and maintaining, property humidity levels. So like mold and stuff like that. So it's sort of, okay, I'll do some more reading anyway.
That, as far as I know, is more about ensuring that you really stay a long way away from things like the dew point and so on.
Yeah, dew point. Okay, I have seen that reference before. So, okay, great. Thank you for that.
Okay. Appreciate it, David. 902-405-6000, 1-877-801-8255. The warmer the air, the more capacity to hold water, right?
Yep.
And I get it, it's relative in the summertime because we do have warmer temperatures, but is that why we get humid temperatures here? Is that there's more capacity
absolutely,
to hold
right?
the air?
Yeah, absolutely. So in cold air, you just cannot hold very much water vapor in it, right? It's just not possible to do, which is one of the reasons why, Astro Connection here, we love doing astronomy in the winter, or, as crazy as it may sound, in mountain ranges, right, which are really cold and high, but you get both the cold and the high altitude, right? So as you have colder weather, you can't keep the moisture in the air. And again, flip side, in the summer, I feel bad just thinking about it. Humidity.
It's coming. Yeah. It's better than shoveling. At least that's what they tell me.
I will say to anyone who's thinking about getting a heat pump, like having that heat pump in the summer, being able to run it in reverse and use it to cool, that's so good.
Is that, and this is going to be a photography question now, is that why in the wintertime we have the ability to get sharper images of landscape and distance because there's not as much capacity to hold things like pollution and things in the air because the air is colder? Because in the summer, it's hazy all the time, and it's a heck of a time to do landscape photography.
Yeah, that was going to be my response. I think you're looking at more the issue of particulate in the air because there's just a lot more happening in terms of heating effects going on in the summer, right? And so you'll have heat haze going on, you'll have a lot of particulate in the air, and on top of that, you'll literally have a lot more refraction around the ground layer as well because of the changes in the air density too. So there's just so much more going on in the atmosphere when it's heated than when it's cold. Right. So I genuinely think that, in the winter when everything is, particularly when it's very still, right, that is the best time to get sort of like crystal clear views. And if you want to get a true experience of that, I know people who work at the South Pole and they say it is freaky when you go down there and you can be like literally 20 kilometers away from a mountain range and you literally think it's like 3 kilometers away because you can see it so clearly. Right, because the air down there is so still and so clear compared to anywhere else they've been.
So the best places for people that work in your field, Dr. Rob, is where it's either really high or really cold.
Dry. Dry is the key thing. So we do a lot, probably the best place, there may be some debate about this, but probably the best place in the world for doing astronomy is the Atacama Desert in Chile, which is very, very high and very, very dry, right? It's cold a lot of the time as well, don't get me wrong. But because it's so high and dry, it's just awesome for doing astronomy.
So is part of your astronomer's kit, is it your telescope, your instruments, and your long underwear?
Certainly for my good friends in the RASC, there are plenty of jokes about how many layers you have on and whether you got your long johns on or not, for sure.
For sure.
I mean, the challenge is like handling anything that's with aluminum that is a precision piece of equipment. You can't do that with big gloves.
Yes.
So you've got to be able to actually do pinpoint alignment on things, and that's tricky, right, when things are very, very cold.
And here we thought scientists had the warm, cushy jobs where they sat in their laboratories all the time.
There are sort of like stories of old professional astronomers who would literally sit in the cages of these big telescopes when they were sort of like setting things up. And in one or another cases, literally getting an eyelid stuck onto the eyepiece.
You're not doing a good job of recruiting people to get into your science field, Dr. Rob.
Oh, for anyone who wants to do it, that's an adventure.
Fair enough. Dr. Rob, we're out of time. I appreciate yours. And Dr. Rob will be here for next week for Science Files. And, of course, you can catch him over at St. Mary's University, watering the halls and telling people about how cold he gets when he's doing his job. Anyway, thanks, Dr. Rob. And that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the program. My thanks to all of our guests, including Dr. Rob, for spending some time with us and imparting their knowledge. I learned stuff, particularly in this segment, but I learn stuff every day here on this program, and I hope you do too. Thanks to all of you who picked up the phone and dialed the numbers and joined the conversation. I truly appreciate it. I look forward to the open hours each and every day on the program. Tomorrow, of course, is Wednesday. That means Dr. John is not going to be here this week. He is apparently going to watch a hockey game in Italy. So he is taking the week off, so we'll have to hold the medical questions until next week. So that means tomorrow, folks, we're going to switch the open hour back to 11 o'clock. So we can do the open hour at 11 o'clock tomorrow, and then we can be consistent through the whole week for once. Anyway, thanks to Blake Priddle, who's been pinch hitting for Vanessa Vandenez on the other side of the glass. Fantastic job. As always, my friend, and Team Canada will face either Czechia or Denmark. That game's underway right now. It's currently in the second period. Czechia's up. We'll keep you updated on the Olympics tomorrow. Until then, folks, get out there and enjoy Nova Scotia. Boy, we're lucky to live in the province that we are. People spend lots of money and travel thousands of miles just to come and see it. Be well, everybody, and be kind to one another.